Now, the purpose of the Bible is to testify of Jesus Christ. The Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, points to Christ.
The Bible is true in a very strange way. What you do as an educated person is sample that structure that constitutes the sum total of the texts of our civilization.
Because if those four things are true, that there's truth, that God exists, that miracles are possible, and the New Testament is reliable enough to let us know that the resurrection occurred, then Christianity is true. Because if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity is true.
So, what is the food you give to the soul? It is reading the Bible, the Word of God. And I don't care who you are, you cannot live a victorious life if you neglect Bible reading and Bible study.
But what we have at stake here is far more than that. You know, your life depends on this book. So read it.
Pulpit Commentary, Leviticus chapter 11 verse 1. The Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron. Aaron, having now been consecrated high priest, is joined with Moses as the recipient of the laws on cleanness and uncleanness in Leviticus chapter 11 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 13 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 14 verse 33, Leviticus chapter 15 verse 1. His name is not mentioned in Leviticus chapter 12 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 14 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 17 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 18 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 19 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 20 verse 1, Leviticus chapter 21 verses 1 and 16, Leviticus chapter 22 verses 1, 17, and 26. Probably there is no signification in these omissions. Verse 2, these are the beasts that ye shall eat, in order that the Israelites might know how to avoid the uncleanness arising from the consumption of unclean flesh. Plain rules are given them, by which they may distinguish what flesh is clean and what is unclean. The first rule is that anything that dies of itself is unclean, whether it be beast, bird, or fish. The reasons of this are plain. For one, the flesh still retains the blood, which no Israelite might eat. And two, there is something loathsome in the idea of eating such flesh. Next, as to beasts, a class is marked off as edible by two plainly discernible characteristics, and instances are given to show that where there is any doubt owing to the animals possessing one of the characteristic marks only, the rule is to be construed strictly. As to fish and insects, equally plain rules, one in each case, are laid down. But as birds are not readily distinguished into large classes, the names of those that are unclean are given one by one, the remainder being all of them permissible. Thus the simple Israelite would run no risk of incurring uncleanness by inadvertently eating unclean food, whether of beast, bird, fish, or insect. The object of the regulations being to exclude all meats naturally offensive to the human taste. All carnivorous quadrupeds are shut out by the rule of chewing the cud, verse 3. With the same purpose, birds of prey and birds that eat offal are prohibited, verses 13 through 19. And scaleless fish on account of their repulsive appearance, verses 9 through 12. As well as beetles, maggots, and vermin of all sorts. In the case of beasts and fish, the rules laid down to mark off those things that are offensive, being general in their application, are such as to include in the forbidden class some few which do not appear naturally loathsome. This is owing partly to the difficulty of classification, partly to a change of feeling which experience has wrought in the sentiments of mankind with regard to such edibles as swine's flesh and shellfish. Verses 3 and 4. Whatsoever partake the hoof, and is cloven-footed, should rather be translated, whatsoever partake the hoof, and completely divides it, the camel parts, but does not wholly divide the hoof, as there is ball at the back of the foot, of the nature of a heel. Verse 5 the coney, Hebrew, shaf, and the hyrax syriacus. Or wobber, still called in southern Arabia tsofan, a little animal similar to, but not identical with the rabbit. They live in the natural caves and clefts of the rock. Psalm chapter 104 verse 18, are very gregarious, being often seen seated in troops before the openings of their caves, and extremely timid, as they are quite defenseless. Proverbs chapter 30 verse 26. They are about the size of rabbits, of a brownish-gray or brownish-yellow color, but white under the belly. They have bright eyes, round ears, and no tail. The Arabs eat them, but do not place them before their guest's keel. Verse 6 the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof. There is little doubt that the same animal as our hare is meant. Neither the hare, however, nor the hyrax chews the cud in the strict sense of the words, but they have the appearance of doing so. The rule respecting chewing the cud was given to, and by Moses as a legislator, not as an anatomist, to serve as a sign by which animals might be known to be clean for food. The nominal, not scientific language is used here, as in Joshua chapter 10 verse 12, as we might speak of whales and their congeners as fish, when there is no need of scientific accuracy. Clark. All these marks of distinction in the Levitical law are wisely and even necessarily made on the basis of popular observation and belief, not on that of anatomical exactness. Otherwise, the people would have been continually liable to error. Scientifically, the camel would be said to divide the hoof, and the hare does not chew the cud. But laws for popular use must necessarily employ terms as they are popularly understood. These matters are often referred to as scientific errors, whereas they were simply descriptions, necessarily popular, for the understanding and enforcement of the law gardener. Verse 7 the swine, though he divide the hoof, and be cloven-footed. Here, again, the description is not according to anatomical analysis, but to ordinary appearance. The pig appears to be cloven-footed, and it would be misleading to give any other account of his foot in ordinary speech. But scientifically speaking, he has 4 toes. The prohibition of the use of swine's flesh does not arise from the fear of trichinosis or other disease, but from the disgust caused by the carnivorous and filthy habits of the eastern pig. The repulsion originally felt for swine's flesh was natural, and, where the animal is carnivorous, is still natural, but where its habits are changed, and it has become simply graminivorous, the feeling has ceased to exist. Verse 8 of their carcass shall ye not touch. This prohibition is founded upon the same feeling of disgust as the prohibition of eating their flesh. Whatever is foul must be avoided. Verses 9 through 12 whatsoever hath fins and scales. The absence of fins and scales, or their apparent absence for phenomenal language is used, as before, gives to fish a repulsive look, on which is grounded the prohibition to eat them. Eels and shellfish are thus forbidden, though a long course of experience has now taken away the feeling of repulsion with which they were once looked upon. The flesh of the beasts forbidden to be eaten is only described as unclean, but that of the prohibited fish, birds, insects, and vermin is designated as an abomination unto you. Verses 13 through 19 the unclean birds are those which are gross feeders, devourers of flesh, or offal, and therefore offensive to the taste, beginning with the eagle and vulture tribe. It is probable that the words translated owl verse 16, nighthawk verse 16, cuckoo verse 16 should be rendered ostrich, owl, gull, and perhaps for swan verse 18, heron verse 19, lapwing verse 19 should be substituted ibis, great plover, hoopoe. In the case of the bat, we have again phenomenal language used. Being generally regarded as a bird, it is classed with birds. Verses 20 through 23, all fowls that creep should rather be rendered all winged creeping things. That is, all flying insects. None are allowed except the Saltatoria, or locust family. The word translated beetle signifies a sort of locust, like the other three words. That the locust was a regular article of food in Palestine is amply proved. It is well known that locusts were eaten by many of the nations of antiquity, both in Asia and Africa, and even the ancient Greek thought the cicadas very agreeable in flavor. In Arabia they are sold in the market, sometimes strung upon cords, sometimes by measure. And they are also dried and kept in bags for winter use. They are generally cooked over hot coals, or on a plate, or in an oven, or stewed in butter, and eaten either with salt or with spice, and vinegar, the head, wings, and feet being thrown away. They are also boiled in salt and water, and eaten with salt or butter. Another process is to dry them thoroughly, and then grind them into meal, and make cakes of them keel. Compare Matthew chapter 3 verse 4. The expression goeth upon all four means groveling, or going in a horizontal position, in contrast with two-legged birds just spoken of. Verses 24 through 28, these verses contain an expansion of the warning contained in verse 8, to the effect that the touch of the dead bodies of the forbidden animals was defiling, as well as the consumption of their flesh. A further mark of an unclean animal is added in verse 27. Whatsoever goeth upon his paws, that is, whatever has not hoofs, but goes stealthily, like beasts of prey of the eat kind. It includes also dogs. Verses 29 and 30, the creeping things that creep upon the earth. This class contains things that go on their belly, but have not wings, like the previous class of creeping things verses 20 through 23. By the words translated tortoise, ferret, chameleon, lizard, snail, mole, different varieties of the lizard are probably meant. The mouse is joined by Isaiah with eating swine's flesh, and the abomination Isaiah chapter 66 verse 17. Verses 31 through 38, as the little animals just mentioned, weasels, mice, and lizards are more likely than those of a larger size to be found dead in domestic utensils and clothes. A further warning as to their defiling character is added, with talcs for daily use. The words translated ranges for pots verse 35 should rather be rendered covered pots, that is, pots or kettles with lids to them. Seed which is to be sown, that is, seed corn, is not defiled by contact with these dead animals, unless it has been wetted by water being put on it, in which case the moisture would convey the corruption into the seeds. Verses 39 and 40. The loathsomeness of the bodies of even clean animals that have died a natural death makes them also the means of conveying defilement to any one who touches them. Verses 41 through 43, the last class is that of vermin, which constitute a part of the unwinged creeping class already spoken of verses 29 and 30. Whatsoever goeth upon the belly indicates snakes, worms, maggots, whatsoever goeth upon all four. Things that grovel, as moles, rats, hedgehogs, whatsoever hath more feet, or doth multiply feet, centipedes, caterpillars, spiders. Verses 44 through 47, these concluding verses give a religious sanction to the previous regulations, and make them matters of sacred, not merely sanitary or political, obligation. They were to sanctify themselves, that is, to avoid uncleanness, because God is holy, and they were God's. They were thus taught that ceremonial cleanness of the body was a symbol of holiness of heart, and a means of attaining to the latter. For I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt. It is possible that Egypt may be named as being the lot of animal worship. To be your God ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. The only way by which there can be communion between God and man is the way of holiness. Jewish industry and care has counted the number of letters in the Pentateuch, and marked by the use of the letter in larger type, in the word, which occurs in verse 42, that letter is the middle letter of the whole work from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Deuteronomy. It is easy to see what a protection to the text such minute and scrupulous care must be.